Hey, what's up? Hello everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and today we have a very, very interesting episode. We are bringing back the tier list, but this time we're not ranking international contenders. We're not ranking Nolan movies. We are ranking studios in terms of the award season and how well they campaign. And then we'll talk about some movies that each of those studios have and some of their awards prospects this year in terms of getting into Best Picture. But before we dive into all that today, if you're new here, consider dropping a like, a subscription. That way you can stay involved with everything that we do here on the channel. We have movie news each and every day. Drop a comment down below with what your thoughts are on this tier list. And if you love movies, consider going down to the description and joining our Discord. We talk movies each and every day in award season. That's kind of our focus here. But Matt, tier list time. How do you feel?
We're gonna go through all of these different companies and how they normally do through the award season. We're gonna be doing a mix of how they normally do and how they look like they're going to do this year. So let's start off in the F tier.
Stinkers.
F tier, yeah, the real not good studios. Now this is kind of not fair because two of the studios that we have in this tier, they really have never been in the race before, but it doesn't look like they're going to really be in the race this year. So the first one we'll mention is Bleecker Street, which if your film sells to Bleecker Street, you know it's not touching the awards race. Mass was the one that it happened to a few years ago, right, Dyl?
Yeah, Mass is a team that I selected in our Filmball game before I knew they were Bleecker Street. I was like, oh, the ratings for this are amazing. People are going to show up for this. The critics are going to make sure this is risen up, and Bleecker Street made sure it was their duty for this movie to get no love whatsoever. And this year, they have One Life, the Anthony Hopkins movie, which sold to that just very recently. So all those people having One Life, Austin, it's probably deaf for the movie right here.
Bleecker Street is basically the graveyard for independent films. If you want your indie film to do really well, sell it to Sony Pictures Classics. If you want your indie movie to be forgotten about, sell it to Bleecker Street. And the other two that we'll add into the F tier, I feel bad about this. It kind of has to be done. G-Kids, which is handling The Boy and the Heron and does all the Miyazaki movies. They've never done a Best Picture campaign. In fact, they've never done a campaign outside of animation. So we're going to just put them in the F tier. I don't think they have what it takes to do a full-fledged Best Picture campaign. And the last F tier, maybe this is biased, but it's got to be Angel Studios. Sound of Freedom. They could prove us wrong. They could prove that they know how to campaign, but I'm gonna be completely honest. A studio that was fully just made only to release this movie pretty much, just because no one else wanted to touch the film, that doesn't sound like the type of people that are gonna know how to market to Hollywood, who are gonna know how to campaign this to the Academy. They could really prove us wrong. Angel Studios could do a great job, but for now, just to be safe, we gotta put them in the F tier.
They could pull an Apple with Coda and this pops up across the board, wins Best Picture, but are we predicting that? No. We will gladly be proven wrong, but for the moment, F seems very solidified. The D tier, though, has, I think, some studios that really know what to do in their respective categories, but they can't really branch off besides that. So what two studios do we have in the D tier?
At the very bottom of the D tier, I wanted to put in Janus Studios. This could be F tier. So Janus is technically Janus and Sideshow. They own the Criterion Collection. And the reason they're in the D tier is because they did manage to campaign Drive My Car to a Best Picture nomination just a few years ago, which was really outstanding what they were able to do. They knew how to latch on to critics, bringing that film all the way to Best Picture. But this year, their slate, there's nothing they can do that with. But the fact of the matter is, if Janus gets their hands on something that could be a Best Picture player, they do know what to do to push that film. And then I'm also going to talk about IFC. They have really not had a contender for years. The last time they had a Best Picture player was in 2014 with Boyhood. They haven't really shown any interest in being in the Oscar race, but this year we're going to see if they can manage to push their film, The Taste of Things, into an international win over top of Zone of Interest. I mean, the Zone of Interest looks like the juggernaut contender, but I don't think they're really interested in Best Picture anymore, which is why they're all the way down here in the D tier.
Janus and IFC are studios where if they have something, they're pretty good at making sure it at least shows up. I think Janus last year showed that they are for real in the international category, getting EO all the way to the nomination. And I think it will be a real test of things this year with whether it's About Dry Grasses or Totem. Is Janus good enough to be kind of like Netflix's In Picture to always solidify one movie in the international category? Or is it just they happen to have just one of the most likable or critics' favorites movies every year in that category. I think this year is the real test for that. So they may be bottom D tier now, but next year, if Totem gets in, About Dry Grasses, they could be top D tier.
And the last one I want to throw in here is Mubi, which I just thought about at the last second, and Mubi has never had anything close to Best Picture. They also, last year, did not get in to International Feature either, despite having Decision to Leave. But the thing with Mubi is I can see them on an upwards trajectory. They technically maybe should be F tier because they've never had success in the past, but you can tell they're gunning for that to be their future. This year, they have a bunch of international contenders. Nothing that's really standing out to me as like, oh, that's a surefire, it's gonna be in there. But I think we could see in the next 10 years, Mubi get something into Best Picture. Maybe even the next 5 years. They are really putting in the work to be there. And I don't think they're there yet, which is why they're in the D tier. But very soon, I could see them make their way in.
That now moves us to our C tier, and this is where you first get into the realm of studios that can produce Best Picture nominees. They're just not very consistent with that. And this year, I think it's very interesting to how we want to delve up these C tier contenders. Currently, we have 3 of them. One typically is pretty good at campaigning. They just don't really have anything this year. Yeah. One is pretty good at getting that Best Picture nomination, just other nominations struggle. And the other one, the one I feel should be at the bottom of C tier, is the one where maybe they do stuff, but usually they kind of let us down. And I think the bottom of C tier should be Sony. This year they have Across the Spider-Verse, they have Dumb Money, and they have the theatrical rights to Napoleon, but not the awards chances. At least to our knowledge, Apple is still handling that.
It looks like Sony's really going all in on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which power to them, but it looks like the tide is turning against them on Across the Spider-Verse, unfortunately. Yeah, Sony does disappoint us every single year, it seems. Last year with The Woman King.
Honestly, I think there's a case for Sony to get pushed down to the D tier, but I think keeping them at C, because at least they have some prior history. It's just been a while since that history. So I think for C tier, they're bottom, and then these next ones are like a lot higher. There's a giant gap between these. But this year, at least, Dumb Money, I don't think this still has a shot in Best Picture. I think its only case is in that adapted screenplay category, but still, that category looks pretty deep. Maybe this could pop up at WGA, but outside of that, I don't really see much. If this were stronger, maybe actor, maybe supporting actress, editing, but it's not a picture player, so no. And then Across the Spider-Verse, animated seems like a lock for nomination, probably the front runner to win. Score, song, possible nominations there, and then if this is a surprise Best Picture nominee in our guaranteed lineup of 10, sound and editing could come along in the package to, you know, boost it up a little bit to definitively be in that top 10 and not in that 15 to like 18 range where I think it is right now.
Across the Spider-Verse right now looks like a 1 nomination, 1 win movie, but there is a world and there is an angle for this to come back. Sony is going hard at campaigning this movie. Like, they want this to work.
The only reason I know about this is because it just came to my city a few weeks ago, but Daniel Pemberton is on the road for Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh.
Not Across, and they're doing like live showings of the movie with him playing the music. So I'm surprised they haven't been doing that for Across the Spider-Verse. You know, obviously this is not a awards campaign, but you know, you go to a city, some voters could be there, plus it's good press if you're promoting the current movie. So I think there's still a world where this could be animated and score. I just don't know if it can get much more than that, because score, at least to me, looks very weak this year. But I feel like we say that every year, and then it's just Best Picture nominees for all 5 slots.
So the next one in our C tier is Amazon MGM. Technically, we could split it up and say Amazon and MGM, but actually they just combined. So now Amazon Pictures is now known as Amazon MGM. Honestly, the thing with Amazon and MGM, at least MGM has been, they're solid at getting the nomination in the end, but they always end up getting less than they should. For example, last year, Women Talking looked like a 6 to 8 nomination movie, and it ended up with 2 nominations. The year before, Licorice Pizza looked like it should be 6 nominations minimum. It ended up with 3 nominations. MGM in the past has really been slipping. Amazon, on the other hand, they have not had a lot of contenders, but they have had some good success in the past with Sound of Metal, which probably in a normal year would not have made it. It made it because of COVID and the people just being at home watching movies. That might have slipped under the radar in other years. And of course, the big Amazon success story is Manchester by the Sea, which was the first streaming film ever nominated for Best Picture. And this year, there are 4 contenders coming out of Amazon MGM. I would say, hands down, American Fiction has to be the number one. Now, I've seen people saying, oh, they're not doing as many screenings for it. Oh, it's like they're really not ramping up into the FYC yet. Yeah, because the movie's coming out in December. I think they're really going to start pushing it around Golden Globes nominations because they know that's where the race is going to ramp up. I could see the package for American Fiction, which I will maintain is their number one priority. I could see the package for this being picture, actor, adapted screenplay, maybe supporting actress, editing, and if we really want to stretch it, I could see score come along with it.
I can get the minimum, because the thing with American Fiction is I see the reason why some people may not have it super high, but the fact that it won TIFF, there's a very, very, very strong stat correlating with TIFF winners getting the picture when they come from English-speaking films, and I just don't see why that ends this year. This checks off the boxes of being a crowd-pleaser movie, a movie people like, and it's a comedy where you kind of need to have 2, 3, 4 of them in picture, and this would be our third comedy in the Best Picture race, assuming you also have Barbie and The Holdover. So I agree, picture, actor, adapted is its floor at this very moment, and then it could soar from there. But if you want to be a little spunky, a little creative, Air is right there. They're the ones who are having all of these screenings at the moment. Its package would be picture, original, and then from there you can kind of add some other stuff. Editing, maybe, probably not. Supporting actress, that race is a little bit more open. I could see Viola popping up at SAG, at Golden Globe. Anything else may be a little bit of a struggle, but I think Damon is out of lead actor, and Affleck definitely is not in for a director. So it's got a lot smaller of a package, but it could be a 2-nomination Women Talking-esque Best Picture nominee of just screenplay and picture.
They are doing a ton of screenings with this movie, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of demand for those screenings. I've been hearing the screenings are largely empty, which is not very promising for a movie to get the buzz to get in. It's
just weird that they're doing these screenings now. Like, I feel like with the looming agreement for SAG, you want to wait until that's done so you can have Viola Davis there. You could have Matt Damon, Ben Affleck. No one's at the Air screening, so what's the positive of going to the screening when you can just watch it at home? Because if you're a voter, you probably already have a for your consideration thing, or you have Amazon Prime and just watch it that way.
Personally, I think Air is definitely their second priority. As much as they might seem like they're pushing it more, that's really going to change by December when American Fiction gets out there. Let's talk about the other two movies that Amazon MGM has, because they also have Saltburn and they also have The Boys in the Boat. And Saltburn, the reviews for this one are very mixed. It seems to be very much leaning towards younger people, like people our age. Gen Z seems to love this movie, and older people seem to find it absolutely obnoxious. But if this was to get into Best Picture, I would see a package of picture, actor, supporting actress, original screenplay, production design, and maybe editing.
I cannot see actor at all. From what I've heard, he is doing a lot in the movie, but our race is so packed, and I don't see Keoghan jumping over Jeffrey Wright or Paul Giamatti or Coleman Domingo. I don't think actors are in the cards at all. I think if this is a picture player, it's original, it's production design, it's costumes, and that is its total package. If Babylon couldn't crack in last year, I don't see how Saltburn succeeds this year in a much more crowded race.
And I agree with you, which is why I don't have it in any of the categories I just said.
Yeah.
But if it were to be in those categories, if this were to be a Best Picture contender, I do think that Rosamund Pike would come along with it, and I do think that Barry Keoghan would be able to break into that top 5 if the film was stronger. The film is not strong, which is why it won't do that, but if it was, everyone who watches this movie, the people that love this movie, they talk about Barry Keoghan. They talk about how this might be the best performance of his career, and he just almost won the Oscar last year. Actually, he didn't almost win, but he did win the BAFTA, so he was in conversation to win.
Yeah.
But
again, the Babylon comparisons, Margot Robbie, best part of the movie, one of her best performances in years, and
if Babylon did get in, Margot Robbie probably would have too.
Maybe. You have a point there. But Amazon and MGM's fourth contender here is The Boys in the Boat, the new George Clooney movie coming out on Christmas Day. Really, we can't drop this until it's at least been screened. So obviously this is in no one's top 10 for any category at the moment because it hasn't been seen. We can't get rid of it yet.
I have no faith in George Clooney as a filmmaker, so I'm not going to even include The Boys in the Boat in my top 30. You're technically right. It just, to me, this feels like the Tender Bar. It doesn't feel
Tender Bar still hit some nominations, not the Oscars, but on the way.
It sure did, but this doesn't feel like it'll be anything more than that. The Tender Bar was just a mid-film that people thought might be a thing at the very last minute, and The Boys in the Boat I think is going to be the same. People are going to convince themselves, ooh, maybe this gets one acting nomination, and it won't. But maybe it will at like the Globes or something, but nowhere that matters is going to nominate this movie anywhere. Anyways, our final company in the C tier is going to be Disney/20th Century Pictures, aka the main Disney slate. Now, the thing with Disney and 20th Century is they're very good at getting nominations for their films, just not in the main categories. And I would say that's partially because Disney has another subsidiary company that is totally entirely focused on awards. They have Searchlight, and Searchlight, they take the awards movies. They take the best picture players. And Disney 20th Century, they do the bigger movies that are more for a wide release mainstream audience. Sometimes those movies end up being awards players like Ford v Ferrari or like Black Panther, but this year doesn't look like it. They have solid contenders in categories like animation, song, visual effects, but really nothing else. So just to blast through the top 3 contenders that they have: Wish, which looks very solid for animation, song, score. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 looks great for makeup, visual effects. Could be a Golden Globes player. Maybe if we really wanted to reach, we could see this get into PGA. Then they have The Creator, which looks like a VFX front runner, but really nothing else beyond that. I could see sound. Dylan, I know you were saying production design or score could be a thing. I'd say no. I'd say sound is sound and VFX would be the limit for me.
That sounds like a better combo, because at least my case for visual effects is we haven't had a solo nomination visual effects winner in a while. It's like, well, if the stat continues, maybe it needs something else. But also, I think the visual effects in this movie are good enough to win on its own.
Now, some people might point out to me, oh, well, what about The Bike Riders? The Bike Riders is 20th Century Studios. That movie's not dead. I really think The Bike Riders is dead because everyone we've been hearing from is like, yeah, it's fine. This, to me, is Armageddon time. It is the movie that people are like, yeah, it's good enough. But good enough doesn't get Oscar nominations. You need passion. Yeah. And this one doesn't have passion. But if it did have passion, the package I would see for it would be picture, actress for Jodie Comer, original screenplay, and costumes. I would leave Austin Butler out personally.
To add on to your overall conversation about Disney 20th Century, is it's usually movies like this that are strongly competing for individual categories, unless they just have the giant box office movie like you talked about with Black Panther, Ford v Ferrari, Avatar. And yes, I think those will continue in the near future, as if we ever see a MCU movie again, it will be from this sector or the next Avatar movie or some, bigger budget movies, because it's not like 20th Century puts out duds. It's just they're not to the level of the Searchlight movies, which we'll get to Searchlight eventually.
These are their money-making movies. Actually, I'm a little confused as why The Bike Riders is a 20th Century movie and not a Searchlight movie. It feels much more fitting for Searchlight. But yeah, in general, they're C tier because they don't make the type of movies that are contending for the big Oscars unless they're really sensations like Avatar, like you said.
That is now going to bring us up to the B tier, and I think the B tier has a lot of interesting studios. You and I disagree with the order these should be at, which I think is where our interesting discussions are coming from here, because I would put a specific studio up on the bottom of this tier, but I would love to hear your argument for why Apple TV is the bottom of B tier, because I do agree, but also would put it a little bit higher.
I think Apple TV gets so much more credit than they deserve in terms of Oscar campaigning, because they had one successful campaign with Coda. Yes, they made a miracle happen, but that doesn't say to me that they are solid overall campaigners. It means that they saw an opening and they moved on it. They had done a shit job with campaigning the rest of the year until the very end. Apple TV didn't just come out of nowhere and try to do that. They started in 2020, or was it 2019? I think it was 2019, they tried The Banker, and The Banker went absolutely nowhere. And then in 2020, they tried with Swan Song, and that went nowhere. And then in 2021, miracle happened. Coda, bam, Babu, there you go. Just having one success doesn't mean that they're the greatest at this, as I've heard some people refer to them as. I've heard some people say that they are an S-tier campaigner. Absolutely not. When Killers of the Flower Moon does very well with nominations, it's not because Apple TV is an amazing campaigner, it's because it's Killers of the Flower Moon. It's a Martin Scorsese movie. You know, it's not rocket science to campaign that. And they're not going to be able to get it to a win. I don't think that they have what it takes to do that. They also have Napoleon this year. Yes, Napoleon is going to be secondary to Killers of the Flower Moon. I could see that one picking up some crafts and tech nominations. On a personal level, I don't know. I think we haven't seen enough from Apple TV Plus to really put them ahead as campaigners. To me, they just got very obscenely lucky with Coda.
Looking at their movies this year, as you mentioned, Killers of the Flower Moon, this seems to be an across-the-board type player. So you have picture, director, adapted, both lead categories, supporting actor, editing, cinematography, sound, production design, costume, score. 12 categories it's looking to break into. Can it hit all 12? Definitely, but we could see something like production design or costumes drop off to not have it hit every individual category. Then Napoleon on the other side, I do agree. I think this, unless the movie is complete awfulness, I think we'll hit at least 2, if not 3 tech nominations. I think in our empty visual effects field, this could be one of our movies. Sound, production design, costumes all seem very likely because this is a grand scale war epic. The sound sounds very good. The production design in the big scale buildings and battle scenes. And then if this were to be a Best Picture player, editing could creep in there, but neither of us have it in the Best Picture race, so we do not have editing in our top 10.
I'd love to hear, because you said we have very different orders, what would be your bottom of the B tier?
My bottom of the B tier would be A24. I know they hit gold last year, but every year leading up to that, they continuously underperform.
I disagree with you. I strongly disagree. They had maybe 2 years where they underperformed, and outside of that, they have done very well every single year.
I mean, I see them as the same as Apple. They come into the race and hit big their first time around with Moonlight, and then they struggled a bunch. Room, but first real trying. Like, Room hit, but I feel like Moonlight was the first real big campaign. Then they had those years of changing at the last minute. And then last year, kind of how you talked about Apple TV finding the right space with Coda. I feel like they found that with Everything Everywhere. Because we talked about all season last year. Like, oh, A24, can they really run a real campaign? Can they get multiple below the line nominations? Can they get in multiple movies? As we saw, they still only got 1 movie in, but The Whale didn't hit well. So like, I'm very interested to see this year, how do they do? Because I could see a world where A24 misses Best Picture entirely this year. You could also see a world where they get 2 nominations. And I could see a world where they have 3 movies with above the line nominations. So I don't know. To me, this B tier is very interesting because I feel like they all have their positives, but they also all have their negatives. Because A24, I think, is a little bit better than Apple TV overall, but I think A24 is last year showing better, but I think this year Apple TV should be higher on the list than A24.
Maybe this year because of Killers of the Flower Moon. I don't think you're giving the campaigners at A24 enough credit for what happened last year. They didn't luck into Everything Ever All at Once. They took advantage of what they saw. And they did a fantastic job with manipulating what they saw. Same with The Whale. They did such a good job with both of those movies in riding off of the organic buzz. They don't have a ton of money to market, so they rely on internet buzz and organic meme culture to build their movies into sensations. So their first 3 years, Room, then Moonlight, which won Best Picture, then Lady Bird, those were all really organic successes that just ended up toppling these bigger campaigners. Then 2018, 2019, yeah, they couldn't choose a lane, they couldn't decide on a film, but I think they really got into the swing again in 2020 with Minari. They took advantage of Alan Kim being cute memes. They took advantage of those online Q&As, built up buzz so organically, and made it into Best Picture.
I think part of it is just the difference of studios, because when you talked about taking advantage for Apple and Coda was they lucked into it with A24, it's they took it, or they learned the right way to go. And then I think for the 2020 year, Amazon, you were sounding like any other year this wouldn't be in. Minari, any other year wouldn't be in because it was an empty field. Something had to go in there.
The difference between Apple TV, I think, lucking into Coda is that during the nominations process, they didn't realize what they had. They probably could have gotten 3 or 4 nominations more for that film if they were really pushing it for nominations. What ended up happening is that they realized people were talking about, The Power of the Dog is just gonna win, and I don't know how I feel about that. You know, I didn't really love that movie. And they saw, well, we have a movie that maybe people might love a little bit more. And they latched onto that, and they threw their money in at the very last minute. What A24 does that's different, they don't have the money to throw, so they really rely on organic growth. While Apple TV can just toss a shit ton of money in and try and influence people, A24 has to rely on their films building memes. The Whale became a meme, and Brendan Fraser was so loved that they were like, let's ride on this. Let's push Brendan Fraser as far as we can go through talk shows, through just appearances in general. And with Everything Ever All at Once, it's the same thing. They found a movie that the internet loved, and they let the internet talk about it so much that suddenly it was everywhere. That's what they're really, really good at. And that's why, personally, they would be the top of my B tier.
Well, to run over A24's possible films in the race this year, we have the Zone of Interest for director, international, cinematography, score, editing as possible nominations. Past Lives, you can make them a 1A, 1B. Past Lives for director, original, actress, editing, and score would be possible packages for both of those movies to break into the race. I can see the angle for them both to overperform, and I can also see the angle for both of them to miss out on picture. Zone to be director and international, and Past Lives to be a solo screenplay movie.
I could also see a third angle, which is, what if Priscilla comes in as a more beloved movie, something that audiences really connect with, and that becomes their main push? I'm not going to say that's happening. To me, it looks like a clear number 3 priority for them right now, but I could see an angle where we get picture, actress, adapted screenplay, maybe not, picture, actress, costumes, production design, makeup. Priscilla looks like it might be a bigger contender than we were expecting it to be.
What I'm interested in seeing is, as we go further into the race, can it become a play in director? Can this be our second woman in the category? I think it's a very interesting angle that could pop up there. I definitely can see the switch up where this becomes A24's last minute switch push, which could ultimately hurt all three, or
which never goes well
one
for
of
them.
The three.
Never goes well when they switch at the last minute what their priority is. They're the type of company that needs to pick something early and ride with it. And that is something I see that's worrisome this year. They don't have an Everything Ever All at Once. They have Zone of Interest, which is not a lovable movie. It's a very cold, very experimental movie. And Past Lives is more lovable, but I think they might be trying to chase down the critic angle a little bit more this year with Zone of Interest. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how it goes. Also, we should mention their fourth priority is the Iron Claw, which we don't think is going to be a thing because it's skipping all film festivals and having a theatrical release as its premiere, basically, all the way in December. But if that were to be a contender, we could see picture, actor, supporting actor. I'm not going to call that, though, because it doesn't look like they're prioritizing it at all.
I would agree there, but like we talked about with Amazon, if we have Boys in the Boat, we probably should have Iron Claw as well. That moves us to our next one. So we have Apple TV at the bottom of B, A24 at the top of B, but the next step up from Apple is Neon, where they are a very interesting studio to me because they either hit on all cylinders or they just miss entirely. And this year, I think there's a chance for them to do either of those routes. I think there's a chance for Anatomy of Fall, which seems like they're clear number one, to hit entirely in picture, in director, in actress, in original, and maybe even in editing as well. But I could also see a route where this is just a solo actress or just a solo screenplay, which doesn't seem very likely, but I think people saying, oh, this is definitely in, might need to be open to the chance for this fall just because it does not have the international category support as other films from Neon have had in the past.
For me, Neon feels like A24 light. I think they have the same strengths and the same weaknesses. They are both very much able to get a film in if there is the love for it, as there was with Parasite. I think Parasite's the reason that they're in the B tier to begin with. And last year, they really made a miracle happen with Triangle of Sadness, making it in at the last minute. They handle a lot of the same types of films that A24 has, but maybe just a little bit less prestigious. So yes, Anatomy of a Fall is their number one priority this year. And like you already said, I think it's strongest in actress and screenplay. I'm going to say director feels like it's a little bit far off now because the fact that this was not selected for international, I do think kills a little bit of momentum for this movie. But people are seeing it, they're really loving it, and it does release very, very shortly from right now. I think it's just a toss-up. What do you think is their second priority? Is it Ferrari or is it Origin?
I still feel like it's Ferrari because Origin has yet to get a release date, and I would not be shocked if Origin gets pushed to next year and it's just not an awards play at all. It's the Q1, Q2 Neon movie that we get every year that seems like, oh, this could have awards potential if it was just in a different part of the year. Unless it gets a release date in November, which still feels like it's too late for that. I don't think Origin comes out this year because they have Ferrari in December and Anatomy in October. But Ferrari's package, supporting actress, maybe this category is lighter, and Penelope Cruz has got raves out of Venice. Sound editing seem likely, but also have been criticisms from people who have seen the movie. And score, if this was a picture player, it would need some more tech love. I've heard the score is interesting, but also Pemberton has a much more beloved score for Across the Spider-Verse than the one in Ferrari. And then Origin seems like a lighter package, but a more top-heavy one of adapted screenplay and actress.
I guess I agree with you. If Origin releases, it would definitely be above Ferrari, because I see Ferrari as more of a commercial play. But I think it's just clear that Anatomy of a Fall is really what Neon wants to make work this year. I guess we could also mention Perfect Days as an international contender they have, but I don't think it's really anything outside of that. Neon does have a very good slate this year. It's a very deep slate. Their headliners, their big pushes aren't as strong as Triangle of Sadness last year, for example. Anatomy might be stronger than Triangle of Sadness, or maybe they're at the same. I would say they're about the same.
Yeah, I would say they're at the same level. Just last year, the overall 10 may have been a little lighter than this year's 10 might seem like. So, I don't think Triangle gets in this year, but Anatomy would get in last year.
And then next thing in the B tier, I want to mention Sony Pictures Classics. They don't have any movies that are really for the Oscar race this year, outside of The Peasants for animation and international. They are really not participating in the race this year, but normally I'd say Sony Pictures Classics deserves to be in the B tier. They are very strong at getting picture nominees. They're similar to MGM in a way where they push at the very last minute, which means that their films don't perform as well with nominations as they should, but then they do very well with wins. For example, The Father went from being a borderline nomination to being a Best Actor winner, Adapted Screenplay winner, and potentially the runner-up for Best Picture.
That is very true. Sony Pictures Classic is one where even if they don't have a picture player, we can see them poke up in other places, like Parallel Mothers that year, where it got itself into actress. Even after not being selected for international feature, they know how to campaign their movies, but just like Matt had said, they just don't really have much this year. So I think if any other studio had The Peasants is dead. But the fact that they have The Peasants means that it can maybe break into two different categories.
Also, last year with Living, they did a great job with seizing on that. I mean, The Sun kind of crapped out on them. That wasn't their fault. That was the movie's fault. And they did a really great job of pivoting to Living and getting 2 nominations for that movie that it probably would not have gotten really most other years.
And our last studio in the B tier is Universal. They have a very interesting track record, I think. I think they always have one of these bigger Best Picture frontrunner, top 5 movies, but those movies rarely ever stay the number 1 or number 2 throughout the season. And this year, they do have what I would say is the current number 1 of Oppenheimer, which seems like an across-the-board type player. Director, adapted, actor, 2 supporting actors, supporting actress, cinematography, score, editing, sound, production design, makeup, visual effects. It goes on and on and on. This looks like our nomination leader. Just as we saw last year, they had The Fabelmans, and while The Fabelmans was not as beloved as Oppenheimer, The Fabelmans did drift off the further that we got into award season.
I'd say Universal, in my mind, is a little bit similar to Disney, like we said earlier, where the Universal banner is for the more commercial plays, the films that they want to do wide releases for. Universal, like how Disney has Searchlight, Universal also has Focus. I would say that's where their big Best Picture players usually go. But you're right, this year Oppenheimer is much bigger than anything Focus has. So Oppenheimer does deserve to be highlighted, and I don't think it matters who campaigns that one. It would still be big no matter who had it.
I would agree for the most part, but I feel like Universal, outside of maybe Warner Brothers, is the best of these big studios to be the ones.
I would agree. I would agree with you on that for sure.
But now that moves us over to the A tier, where we have the other Universal studio, Focus. And Focus, I think, as you alluded to before, they are very good at getting into Best Picture. They're kind of like Sony Pictures Classic, where if they have a movie and it's competent, it's usually in the race and it's picking up multiple above the line nominations.
They know how to make something work. When they have it, it's in. And this year they have The Holdovers. And The Holdovers looks like their main priority for sure. Because if that gets picture, it's likely to come along in original screenplay, actor, supporting actress, and maybe you could also add on nominations for director, editing, and supporting actor.
And then on the other side, they have Asteroid City that came out over the summer. This definitely seems like a number 2, but a very distant number 2 for them. This one probably is not in the Best Picture race, but could pop up in some other categories, production design, score, like most Wes Anderson movies, and then very, very much on the outside chance looking in, but in a category that has some holes, original screenplay, possibly, but I do feel like Focus, with having holdovers in the same category, is putting all of its chips over there.
To step up one more in the A tier, Netflix. Netflix is so goddamn good at campaigning. The only reason I'd say Netflix is not an S tier campaigner is that they have a problem getting movies to win. I think that continues this year because they have some very solid contenders with Maestro, which could get picture, actor, actress, original screenplay, cinematography, makeup, maybe even editing and sound. Can it win? No, it can't. We know that already from the reviews. This movie does not connect with people enough to win on a preferential ballot. And that's the problem with Netflix all the time. They have movies that are widely loved but are not beloved enough to get those number 1 votes on a preferential ballot. That's what stopped All Quiet on the Western Front. That's what stopped The Power of the Dog. That's what stopped Mank, Trial of Chicago 7, Marriage Story, The Irishman, Roma, all of those films. Oh, and I not to even mention Don't Look Up. They're movies that have passionate supporters and also have other people that go,
You just mentioned so many movies that came out in the last 3-4 years. Netflix is great at handling multiple movies, while some of these other studios are great at getting nominations like Focus, like some others. They can usually handle 1. Netflix can handle 2, 3, 4, and get them all in above the line. Picture there's normally 2 as their cap, but they could still, like, there was one year
I think
they
got
had 2.
3. They almost got 3 in 2020 because Ma Rainey was probably one of the 2 next in line.
And then in 2021, they almost also got 3 with Tick Tick Boom, which then pulled an editing nomination as well.
I forgot.
And then they also had, on top of those 3 movies in the Best Picture race, they had The Lost Daughters pulling a screenplay and an acting nomination. It's like they're very good at handling multiple campaigns and getting them in above the line. In fact, last year, they showed they can get movies people hate above the line nominations with Blonde and Best Actress. So this year, you mentioned Maestro. They have May December, which seems that people are warming more up to, so maybe it could peek its head above the line. If this was with any other studio, it's dead. The fact that it's Netflix, though, it's still alive in actress, the supporting categories, in original screenplay. And then they have Rustin, which I think is a true sign to show how strong is Netflix. This movie basically has nothing outside of actor in terms of its award chances. Song, sure. But actor, can they get Domingo a win with nothing else? Maybe screenplay could slide in if he's that strong where the movie warms up to more people. But at the moment, it looks like it's actor or bust for nominations. Domingo is still in the winning conversation because Netflix is backing him. And if they can give him a win with no other nominations, Netflix next year may poke its head up into the S tier.
That's really the 3 that we see as big potentials, but we might as well mention a couple of other contenders which might pop their head up here or there, which we really don't see as Best Picture contenders at all. And that's The Killer. That is Fair Play, Naiad. Society of the Snow is a big international contender.
El Conde could be a cinematography low nomination, but I still think that not even being shortlisted kind of kills its chances there.
Oh, and not to mention they have His Three Daughters and Hitman, which are probably not coming out this year, but if they are, those could be very big contenders.
And now that moves us to the tippy top of A tier. A studio that also, like Netflix, doesn't really get wins a lot here in the last few years, but are they sure good at getting nominations and getting nominations for movies that are kind of divisive as well? Warner Brothers, last year, everyone's like, they have nothing. And then Elvis becomes the second highest nominated movie in the whole ceremony. Does it win anything? No, but it was still got so many nominations. And this year they have Barbie, they have Color Purple, they could have 2 Best Picture nominees, and in fact before Dune moved they could have had 3 Best Picture nominees. But Warner Brothers is the one studio outside of maybe Netflix that could get 3 in, and you just don't question it.
They make money, but they also know how to take those movies that have made money and turn them into Best Picture players. No matter what, year after year, you see them in here. They are greenlighting films that they see awards and critical potential in, as well as financial potential. It's not even like with Disney where they'll make money every year, but a lot of those movies don't connect with awards voters. Warner Brothers consistently makes some of the biggest movies of the year and movies that connect with awards voters. And I think it's very clear to say that their number one push this year is Barbie. And if Barbie gets Best Picture, you can bet it's getting in Best Director, Original Screenplay, probably. I mean, there might be an argument still for adapted, but it seems like it's original now. Supporting Actor, which it could win. Production Design, Costumes, Editing, Song, and then if you really want to stretch it, you could also say Actress for Margot Robbie, Supporting Actress for America Ferrera. You could also say Makeup, and you could even argue for a second Song nomination.
So many nominations for Barbie, and Color Purple is another one of those movies that we have yet to see, or anyone has yet to see, but still seems like it's very solid in that Best Picture race, in that 6 to 12 range, as well as looking very promising in Actress, 1 or 2 supporting actresses, production design, costumes, sound, cinematography, and then having a chance for editing, some original songs, makeup, director even, and maybe a supporting actress. There's a lot of potential here. It's just we have yet to see this movie, so we don't know if this is an actual top 5 player or this is more in that 10 range where a lot of people have it at the moment.
And Wonka is also worth mentioning, which looks at best like a Golden Globes contender, but let's humor it. Let's say it gets into Best Picture. We could see it get into Best Picture, production design, costume design, song, score, maybe visual effects, maybe makeup. And if we really want to stretch it, we could say Timmy gets in for actor.
But now it's some of that you've been waiting for, our S tier. The top of the bunch. And I mean, it's fitting that it's called S tier because we have Searchlight here.
Oh, they are the kings. No other studio could get the Best Picture frontrunner and the runner-up. That wouldn't happen anywhere else, but they did it, and they consistently managed to get 2 nominees in. They are, I think, undeniably the best in the frickin' game.
I know, and it's so interesting because when you go back to your statements about Disney and 20th century, sometimes some of these movies could even fit under that 20th century label, and you can split the love up a little bit, but no, Searchlight, they're the kings. They know what to do. This year, they got Poor Things, and so many people were doubting Poor Things early on, but it was clear, this is Searchlight's movie. Why are we so low in it? And then it went to Venice, and then it popped off. Director, adapted, actress, supporting actor, costumes, editing, cinematography, production design, makeup. That's 9 right there. Throw in another actor. That's 10. Score maybe even 11. And it could just keep rising up in the ranks. Poor Things looks like a great all-around contender.
Could be the nominations leader. I know you said it was Oppenheimer earlier. I could say it'd be Poor Things.
It could. I think that counter right there just has up to 11 for Poor Things. The Oppenheimer was at 14. So Oppenheimer has more to lose out on. The interesting thing this year is how strong can Searchlight be? Because they have All of Us Strangers, which is a movie that makes sense, but also makes sense to miss because we've had similar movies in years past, like After Sun, where maybe the critics love them, but they just don't connect to a wide variety of audiences and bases, and they don't have the highest nomination tally. But All of Us Strangers is competing in the actor category. Supporting actor, supporting actress, adapted, editing, and maybe even cinematography. It's just, can Searchlight and maybe power this movie up? I think even if this was like a Warner movie or a Netflix movie, they probably couldn't do it, but Searchlight is the one that could do it.
All of Us Strangers feels like a movie that could have been A24's like 3rd priority, and they wouldn't get it in. With Searchlight behind it, it does feel like something that could connect with the Academy.
And yeah, it's so interesting too because they pull movies that are seemingly dead in the race back up. Like Nightmare Alley came out, very muted response. Everyone's dropping it from their predictions, and then it has a so-so BAFTA performance, and then Oscar morning. It's picture. It's in all these other categories. Like, whoa, where did this even come from? There was no breadcrumbs even leading us here, but it's Searchlight. Searchlight can make wonders happen.
Anyways, that comes to the end of our ranking, our tier list of these different studios. And this also, I guess, operates as our predictions for this week because we just went through all of the different movies that are in the race, contending for different awards. I hope that this satisfies everyone's craving for some new predictions this week because this is all you're getting. I'm sorry.
Hey, I feel like it's a very deep dive, and I haven't seen anyone else do it like this, where they go down studio by studio saying, hey, this is what they had this year, and here's where they could factor into each category in the race. I think it's kind of interesting.
So what would be your big movers, do you see? Like, at the end of this year, where do you think certain studios could move up or move down in these rankings?
As we talked about before, I think Apple can solidify themselves, let alone getting Killers of the Flower Moon 10 plus nominations. If they can pull out 3, 4 for Napoleon. I think that rises them up the ranks. I think A24 could maybe slide down a little bit if they end up getting 0 Best Picture nominations, especially if they pull a last minute switch to Priscilla. I think that we could see some movement with some of the lower studios, and they could either go up to D, go down to F. We could see Sony maybe even move down a little bit if Spider-Verse is just animated. And I think that Netflix could make a case to go up to the S tier if Domingo wins as the movie's only nomination, or if they somehow pull out another Best Picture nominee of like May, December, or Hitman or something like that. I think that could just show like, hey, they're on the same level of Searchlight. They may not win, but they get those nominations.
I agree with most of what you're saying. Searchlight, I think no matter what, they don't really change for me. Even if they don't get Strangers in, I don't care.
I would say the only way they could move is if somehow Poor Things drops, but I think that's not on them. I think that's just due to public perception, to the perceived wackiness of the movie.
While you say that if Apple gets a few nominations for Napoleon, they could move up or solidify their place in the B tier, I would say if Killers of the Flower Moon gets anything under 10 nominations, Apple TV moves down to C tier for me. That's just because they were given something on a platter that's like, this should be one of the biggest movies of the year. If they can't pull that out and make it actually happen, then I don't think they're B tier even. Similarly, I would say Neon could move a little bit down in the B tier if Anatomy of a Fall really doesn't work out the way that they hope. A24 could fall if, like you're saying, if Zone, if Past Lives don't connect with the Academy. And yeah, Netflix I think has the biggest upward trajectory. If they can get in 2 nominations with the weak slate that they have this year, yeah, they might be the kings of campaigning, even above Searchlight.
We would love to hear everyone's thoughts out there on this tier list, because I mean there was a lot of conversation happened here today. We covered a lot of studios and a lot of different tiers and a lot of movies, so let us know your thoughts. What studios are on the rise, which one are on the decline? But until next time, my name is Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and this is Fantasy Filmball.